Imagine it's Saturday afternoon and you're craving something sweet and homemade, but you want something quick and easy and you don't feel like running to the store. I'm sharing the ingredients I keep on hand for a few fast and simple recipes that you can bake or no bake on a whim. From sweet and savory caramel corn chips for a night of Netflix, popcorn, and a cozy blanket, a giant chocolate chip skillet cookie you'll eat hot out of the pan, to Reese's Peanut Butter Cup Poppers that start with a cookie pouch mix, to starting your Sunday morning with fresh baked butterscotch muffins or pistachio cake with a sweet glaze. It's all on today's episode of Funeral Potatoes and Wilmingtons, a show for people who embrace the warm and cozy spirit of everyday living in the northern Midwest. From the blog Random Sweets, I'm your host, Stacy Mergenthal. I've gotten pretty good at this for two reasons. One, because sometimes I just want something sweet and homemade, but I don't want to spend much time in the kitchen, or I'm being lazy or procrastinating. And two, we live in the country, so I have to be pretty good about keeping my favorites stocked because it's not always sensible to drive 5 miles into Lake Benton to the grocery store, 30 miles to Brookings to buy just 1 or 2 grocery items. And when I say easy, this episode is definitely for my 20-something kids and nieces and nephews and their significant others, and really anyone else who's establishing their baking skills or doesn't have a fully stocked baking pantry. If you hear a few ideas you like, just search for the recipes on randomsweets.com and add the ingredients to your shopping list. Just be sure to eventually use the items so that you don't end up with expired food in your cupboard. Now, I recently made a pan of my sister Heidi's super secret recipe Special K bars. My friend Jill, who shared a few of her own recipes in episode 14, commented, "Your pantry must be incredible. I don't have that cereal or butterscotch chips on hand." And she's right. I do have a pretty incredible baker's pantry, thanks to my husband for building me one out of the wood from our 100-year-old barn that collapsed in a storm. But I'm not like my Grandma Janet, who baked at least once per week and kept her cookie jar freshly stocked for surprise visitors and hungry grandkids. Now, I'll start by sharing some of the very basic, shelf-stable, and perishable staple products that I typically have in supply that you'll need for some of the recipes. Now, in the refrigerator, I always keep large eggs, whole milk, and sour cream. I don't drink whole milk, I drink skim, but my husband drinks whole milk, and I always make sure there's whole milk because that's what I use for baking and making mashed potatoes. In my freezer, I keep mashed ripe bananas. And there's a recipe we'll talk about today, the reason why I like to keep bananas in the freezer. Okay, so for shelf-stable items, these first few items I keep in a sealed jar or container to keep them fresh once I've opened them. The all-purpose flour, sugar, confectioner's sugar, also we call it powdered sugar, and brown sugar. Those I keep in sealed containers once I've opened them. Now the brown sugar, once I've opened it, I keep a large marshmallow or a piece of bread in there to keep it soft. It won't dry out if you have a marshmallow or a piece of bread in there. Now the rest of these I just keep in their own container in the cupboard. Unsweetened baking cocoa, pure vanilla extract, not imitation, baking soda, baking powder, salt, cinnamon, honey, peanut butter, unsalted butter, vegetable or canola oil, and cooking spray. These next items are pretty basic, but they're more specific to the recipes I'm sharing today. So you don't need all of these, you just need the ones for the recipes that you want to have on hand. Mini marshmallows, corn syrup, white vinegar, individually wrapped caramels, like a bag of Kraft caramels, semi-sweet chocolate chips, milk chocolate chips, peanut butter chips, butterscotch chips, cinnamon chips. Yes, I have a fun little basket full of chips in my pantry. Miniature Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Rolo candies, Hershey's Kisses, M&Ms, pretzels, Fritos Scoops corn chips, Townhouse pretzel flip sides crackers, chocolate cake mix and yellow cake mix, brownie mix, a pouch of peanut butter cookie mix, evaporated milk and sweetened condensed milk, cream cheese, quick oats, Rice Krispie cereal and Special K cereal, and Crispix cereal or rice or corn chex, pie filling, Ritz crackers, chocolate-flavored almond bark, instant pudding mixes. So there's 3 flavors I keep on hand: pistachio, vanilla, and butterscotch. And then I also keep the cook and serve butterscotch because that's what I use to make monkey bread. And then pecans, which the pecans you can store in the freezer to keep those fresh. So I probably should have mentioned those in the freezer instead. Now we'll start with the easiest and most traditional recipes. First and foremost, do not overlook a basic brownie mix. And my favorite is a Ghirardelli brownie mix. Everybody kind of has their own. And then also don't overlook traditional Rice Krispies treats made with marshmallows and butter. You can jazz up a brownie mix by using coffee in place of the water that you need for the ingredients. And then you can also add your own extract, like an almond extract or peppermint, or you could even toss in Andy's mint pieces, or stir in a little bit of honey or caramel ice cream topping before baking. In episode 11, my son Sajan and I talked about how he could make a pan of brownies, cut them into servings, and freeze them so he could pull one out anytime and serve it with a side of chip and mint ice cream and hot fudge, or whatever toppings and ice cream that you like. Now, I also talked about this recently on a Kelloland Living segment and talked about how you could use a different kind of a brownie or a blondie and then use coffee ice cream and caramel topping. So the Rice Krispie bars, if you have sprinkles, just a jar of sprinkles, you could stir in a handful or 2 of sprinkles into the Rice Krispies and marshmallow mixture before you spread it into the pan. That makes it kind of fun. Or maybe you use a different cereal altogether, like Fruit Loops or Cocoa Puffs. I've made it with Fruity Pebbles and Special K blueberry cereal. Your options are as endless as the cereal aisle. And speaking of cereal, Special K bars are one of the reasons that I keep corn syrup and butterscotch chips on hand. The caramel-like base is a mixture of just 4 ingredients: Special K cereal, corn syrup, sugar, and peanut butter. And then for the topping, it's just melting semi-sweet chocolate chips and butterscotch chips together and spreading over the top. Now, if puppy chow is your thing, all you need to keep on hand is cereal like the Crispex or corn or rice Chex, semi-sweet chocolate chips, peanut butter, vanilla, and confectioner's sugar. These next 4 recipes are an addicting combination of sweet and savory, and you only need a few ingredients and a sheet pan. So we're going to talk about tangled caramel corn chips. I get tongue tangled saying it. Tangled caramel corn chips, Ritz peanut butter cookies, pretzels with Hershey's Kisses or Rolo candies, Townhouse pretzel flipside cracker with melted Rolo sandwiched between. So for these corn chips, this is another recipe to use your corn syrup. So similar to the Special K bar recipe, you heat the sugar and corn syrup, boil it for a minute, then you stir in the peanut butter and pour over the top of the corn chips or the scoops in a sheet pan. And then you just let them cool. And they're sweet and salty and very addicting. The Ritz cracker peanut butter cookies are popular around Christmas, but I like to make them all year long and then freeze them. And then I can just take out a few for a special treat during the week. All you do is spread peanut butter between 2 Ritz crackers and sandwich them, and then dip them in melted chocolate flavored almond bark. Pretzels with a Hershey's Kiss or a Rolo candy and then an M&M squished on top. Those are also a holiday treat that I'll make all year long and freeze. And then my sister Heidi talked about Rolo candy sandwiched between and melted between Townhouse Flipside crackers on episode 10. I hadn't tried them, and so then after she talked about it, I made those. And those are also a sweet and salty, addicting little treat. But they also freeze really well, so you can stick them in the freezer and just take a few out and control portions a little bit. And here's a tip for keeping a supply of M&Ms, Hershey's Kisses, Rolos. Stock up when the candy goes on sale after a holiday and not just Christmas. It seems like they have colors and wrappers for each season, so be sure to check after Easter, the 4th of July, Halloween, and Thanksgiving. That's also when I try to replenish my stash of the Reese's peanut butter cups, the mini ones, so that I can make Reese's peanut butter poppers. You'll need a mini muffin tin and a pouch of peanut butter cookie mix for these. All you do is Make the cookie dough according to the package directions. Usually it's an egg or 2 eggs, water, and vegetable oil. Then I stir in a little extra peanut butter, maybe 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup, and then roll the dough into little balls about half the size of a golf ball. Then drop them into the cups of the mini muffin pan. You can smush them down if you want, but you don't need to. And then bake them. And as soon as they come out of the oven, you'll press a mini Reese's peanut butter cup into the dough and let them cool. My Thompson nephews, also known as the T-Boys, they love these. I also keep the pouches of peanut butter cookie mix on hand to make peanut butter blossoms. So you're going to make the dough the same as the poppers, but place the dough balls on a cookie sheet and bake them like cookies. You'll lightly press a Hershey's Kiss on each cookie when they come out of the oven. I make mine really small because I like them to be only a bite or two, so I get chocolate in each bite. If you like peanut butter and chocolate cookies, but you want something without flour, I've been making a really good flourless peanut butter chocolate chip cookie using a recipe from King Arthur Baking Company. You can search for that on randomsweets.com. I don't want to say it's gluten-free, but it is without flour. The batter comes together really nice. It only takes about 10 minutes, makes a really small batch of only about 15 to 18 cookies. And so it's nice to just make quickly and have a small batch so you're not in the kitchen baking cookies for a long time. And 2 more cookie recipes that come together quickly make small batches are chewy cocoa peanut butter chip cookies and then just a classic chocolate chip cookie. Both make a good dough to freeze so that you can bake a few at a time when you're craving a homemade treat. However, if you are an ultimate chocolate chip cookie lover, I suggest you make Lori Lang's Skillet chocolate chip cookie and grab a fork or maybe a spoon and a carton of vanilla ice cream. The cookie is baked in a cast iron skillet, but if you don't have one, you can use a 9-inch square baking pan or a pie plate. And I've linked to the recipe on her blog, Recipe Girl, from randomsweets.com. Now let's move on to the easiest recipe I have. Cherry Crunch Obler Rumble, also known as cherry dump cake. It's as simple as dumping a 42-ounce can of cherry pie filling into a pie dish or a square baking pan and then topping it with dry yellow cake mix and melted butter and then baking it until it's hot, bubbly, and golden brown on top. And of course, you can use whatever flavor of pie filling that you like best, maybe blueberry or apple. I think peach would be really good. And my favorite brand of pie filling is Lucky Leaf, which it isn't as readily available in our area, but I have found it at Coburn's and Pipestone and Maynard's and Tyler. Next up are 2 of my favorite because they're bars. And if I have a choice between cookies, cake, pie, or bars, I will choose a Midwest-made bar every single time. In episode 1, my friend Jen asked me, which recipe could you make with your eyes closed? And my answer was, yes, caramel brownies. I've been making these since the summer of 1990 when a coworker at 3M brought them to work and I begged her for the recipe. Now, prep time on this is a little bit longer. The prep time's about 20 minutes, and at least 5 minutes of that is spent unwrapping the caramels. But the recipe itself is easy peasy because the brownies actually created by mixing a box cake mix with melted butter and evaporated milk. And that's all there is to that. And then there's chocolate chips spread over the top of that, or actually just, dropped over the top of it. You're not even having to melt the chocolate chips. And then there's a creamy layer of melted caramel. And this recipe is the reason I'll never buy a caramel box brownie mix. The other bar recipe is even simpler. Yellow bars. They are a decadent layer bar made with yellow cake mix, butter, and a rich chocolate layer made by melting together milk chocolate chips in an entire can of sweetened condensed milk. And it really doesn't get much easier than this for a potluck or a food day at work either. These really just don't take much time at all to make. And here's a tip for making bars. I line my 9x13-inch baking pan with parchment paper, and then I use metal binder clips to hold the paper in place while it bakes. You only need a 9x13 cake pan for the recipe I'm talking about next. Like, seriously, you don't even need a bowl. You just need the measuring cups and measuring spoons and a fork because you stir everything right in the pan. Crazy cake, also known as wacky cake, is from the Great Depression era and it does not contain eggs. Crazy cake is a moist, rich chocolate cake that is really surprisingly not too sweet, which means you can eat too much of it. And I especially like the glossy, sort of sticky top. And then I add a little sprinkling of confectioner's sugar on top. Now, if you have the basic staple ingredients I talked about earlier, plus white vinegar, you can make this cake on a whim whenever you're hungry for chocolate. And it's a great cake to serve with ice cream or fresh fruit, too. Well, we're winding down, so I'll end with 4 easy recipes to start your morning off on the right side of the bed. I don't know about you, but it seems like I always have 1 or 2 last bananas that ripen and get spotted before we can eat them. So I peel, mash, and measure them out, and then I pour the mashed bananas into a freezer zipper bag. I write the measurement and the date on the bag, and then stick it in the freezer. And that way I can make double chocolate banana muffins anytime I want. Again, as long as you have the basic ingredients, plus mashed bananas and a cup of mini semi-sweet chocolate chips, you can make them too. And it's a really fun way to use ripe bananas, especially if you're burnt out on traditional banana bread. And even tastier than double chocolate banana muffins, butterscotch muffins are my family's favorite and Sajan's high school's hockey teams. Along with the basic ingredients like flour, sugar, baking powder, salt, eggs, vanilla, and canola oil, this recipe uses a package of instant butterscotch pudding mix and a box of instant vanilla pudding mix for a really nice depth of flavor. Mix the dry ingredients the night before along with the cinnamon brown sugar topping so that you have them in the oven before your coffee maker has even finished brewing. Now, if you like butterscotch, I really hope that you try these muffins and then also search my website for cinnamon butterscotch muffins. Basically, to that original recipe, I added ground cinnamon and cinnamon chips and eliminated the topping. And I want you to message me when you start to smell these baking in your oven. And here's a restaurant industry trick that my sister Callie taught me years ago. If you lightly spray cooking spray on the tops of your muffins before you bake them, you'll have a crispy top just like the bakeries do. All right, we're down to our last 2. And no Midwest morning would be complete without a bundt cake or a coffee cake. So I'm sharing the most basic one, cinnamon coffee cake, and my all-time favorite, amaretto pistachio bundt cake. 6 ingredients is all it takes to make the cinnamon coffee cake because you start with the yellow cake mix and then 3 more ingredients if you want the icing on it. This is a classic coffee cake, a real crowd pleaser. It's nice for people who don't like chocolate. And I feel like I need a drum roll to introduce you to amaretto pistachio cake. I would make this 100 times a day, even if it wasn't a piece of cake to make. Yeah, the recipe calls for a package of yellow cake mix and 2 packages of instant pudding mix. So it's very semi-homemade, but most of the quick recipes I'm talking about today are. Now, my recipe calls for amaretto liqueur, but you can use almond extract instead, or vanilla. And no worries if you don't have a bundt pan, because you can bake this pistachio cake in a 9x13 cake pan, or you could even turn them into muffins. I mean, really, they would be cupcakes, but it's more socially acceptable to eat muffins in the morning. All right, that's my list for you. By now, I'm sure you've noticed a pattern which might help you decide which recipes and ingredients you want to stock for your baking whims. For example, if you have corn syrup, you can make Special K bars and tangled caramel corn chips. Your dry yellow cake mix can be used to make yellow bars, cinnamon coffee cake, cherry crunchable rumble, and pistachio cake. If you need to use up a jar of peanut butter, just find the recipe for the tangled corn chips, puppy chow, Ritz cracker cookies, flourless peanut butter chocolate chip cookies, Reese's PB poppers, or peanut butter blossoms. And always keep a cake mix and 2 flavors of instant pudding mixes, and you'll be just steps away from baking a delicious bundt cake. I hope I gave you some ideas for what to make fast and fussless when you are craving a homemade sweet treat. You'll find all the recipes on randomsweets.com. I'll be back next week with a 2-part episode with Jason when we share about our recent vacation to Gulf Shores, Alabama. Now, I've been to Cancun and Mazatlan, but now that I've soaked up the sun on the white sandy beach and swam in the salty water of the Gulf of Mexico within the United States, I never need to go back to Mexico. Remember to email me your family's recipe or version of cheesy hash browns or hash brown casserole for an episode I'm working on for April. Email me your recipe to stacy@randomsweets.com. That's STACI@randomsweets.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you join me next time on Funeral Potatoes and Wool Mittens, so be sure to subscribe or follow and tell your friends about it. Sweet wishes!